Hello guys, in today's video we will look at the history and evolution of psychology as a discipline, albeit briefly. Psychology as the study of the human mind is a relatively new field. However, interest in studying the human mind dates back to the ancient times. For instance, the Edwin Smith Papyrus, an ancient Egyptian text, contains some of the earliest descriptions of the brain and some speculations on its functions. Ancient Indian philosophy has a variety of theories about the self. The Samkhya philosophy of ancient India, for instance, theorizes about the structure of the mind, claiming that it has 5 components. In China, in the 6th century AD, Ling Shui carried out perhaps what is known as the first psychological experiment in the history of psychology, where he asked participants to draw a circle with one hand and a square with another, presumably to test their vulnerability to distraction. But perhaps the greatest influence to the development of modern psychology were those of the ancient Greeks. Ancient Greek philosophers developed elaborate theories of the psyche, a word they used to describe the mind or soul, and also from which the first half of the word psychology is derived. The most influential among those are the accounts of Plato. Plato used the idea of a psyche to develop a rough framework of human behavior, reasoning, and impulses. His tripartite theory of the soul, the chariot allegory, and concepts of eros would later influence the works of many psychologists, including Sigmund Freud. We can see that early psychology was mostly regarded as the study of the soul. This changed during the 17th century when French philosopher RENE Descartes introduced the idea of dualism. He asserted that the mind and the body were two different entities and their interaction created the human experience. Subsequently, philosophers such as John Locke and Thomas Reid promoted the idea that all knowledge comes from experience. The works of Reid and Locke and other British empiricists emphasized the role of the human observer and the primacy of the senses in defining how we come to acquire knowledge. Physiology also contributed to psychology's eventual emergence as a scientific discipline. The question of the relationship between the mental, or the experience of the senses, and the material, the external reality, was investigated by numerous physiologists between the 18th and 19th century, like Ernst Weber and Gustav Fechner. Their work was called psychophysics. This would serve as a basis for the new science of psychology. The formal development of modern psychology is usually credited to the work of German physiologist Wilhelm Wundt, helped establish the field of experimental psychology by serving as a strong promoter of the idea that psychology could be an experimental field. He opened the world's first psychology lab in 1879. Wundt was interested in the study of the conscious experience and wanted to analyze the contents or the building blocks of the mind. He sought to apply experimental methods to study the internal mental processes. The method he used was called introspection, in which individuals were asked to describe in detail their own mental processes or experiences. While introspection is seen as unreliable and unscientific today, Wundt's early work in psychology helped set the stage for future experimental methods. When psychology finally emerged as a science, debate over how to describe and explain the human mind and behavior began to arise. We will look at some of the schools of thought that represent the evolution of various theories within psychology. One of Wundt's most famous students, Edward Tishner, founded psychology's first major school of thought, which was based heavily on Wundt's theory. According to structuralists, human consciousness can be broken down into smaller parts. While structuralism is notable for its emphasis on scientific research, its methods were considered unreliable, limiting, and subjective. American psychologist William James developed what was called the functionalist approach to the study of the human mind. The focus of functionalism was on what the mind does rather than what it consists of. They focused on how behavior enabled humans to satisfy their needs. Functionalists used the methods such as direct observation to study the mind and behavior. In the early 20th century, a new perspective emerged in Germany called the Gestalt, as a reaction to structuralism. Unlike structuralists, Gestalt psychologists focused on the organization of perceptual experiences. They argued that when we look at the world, our perceptual experience is more than the sum of the components of the perception. In other words, we experience more than the inputs received from the environment. For example, light from a series of flashing bulbs gives us the illusion or sensation of movement. Similarly, when we see a movie, we are actually looking at a series of rapidly moving images of still pictures. Up until this point, psychology stressed on conscious human experience. An Austrian physician named Sigmund Freud changed this entirely when he proposed his theory of personality that emphasized the importance of unconscious mind. Freud believed that early childhood experiences and unconscious impulses contributed to the development of adult personality and behavior. According to him, psychological disorders were the result of these unconscious conflicts becoming extreme or unbalanced. The unconscious mind could be accessed through dream analysis and other methods. Psychoanalysis had a tremendous impact on 20th century thought and influenced various fields, including art and literature of the time. Psychology changed dramatically during the early 20th century with the arrival of behaviorism. Behaviorism rejected the emphasis on both conscious and unconscious mind and instead focused purely on observable behavior. Behaviorism had its early start with Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov, who discovered the process of classical conditioning, showing that behaviors could be learned through association. American psychologist John B. Watson became one of its strongest advocates, writing in his book that the subject matter of human psychology is behavior of human beings, as consciousness is neither definite nor a usable concept. Psychologist B.F. Skinner furthered this school of thought and practice with his concept of operant conditioning, which showed the effects of punishment and reinforcement on behavior. The impact of behaviorism was huge and dominated the field of psychology for over 50 years. While the first half of the 20th century was dominated by psychoanalysis and behaviorism, a new school of thought emerged during the second half of the century that emphasized conscious experience. Two most well-known proponents of humanistic psychology are Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. They rejected the pessimism and determinism of psychoanalysis and the oversimplifying nature of behaviorism. Rogers emphasized the role of free will and self-determinism, while Maslow's contribution to humanistic psychology was his famous hierarchy of needs theory. He suggested that people were motivated by increasingly complex needs. Once the basic needs were fulfilled, people became motivated to pursue higher level needs. Humanism has created a huge impact on the field. Rogers' therapy approach is still commonly used today. Aspects of Gestalt approach and structuralism led to the development of cognitive perspective in psychology, which focuses on how we understand the world around us. Because of behaviorism's emphasis on objectivity and external behavior, psychologists had pulled their attention away from the mind for a long time. With the development of new disciplinary perspectives in linguistics, neuroscience, and computer science, the interest in the mind was rekindled. Ulrich Nietzsche's book Cognitive Psychology serves as a core text that popularized this approach. Another influential figure in this movement is linguist Noam Chomsky. Cognitive psychology has remained a dominant area of psychology as researchers continue to study perception, memory, problem-solving, reasoning, intelligence, language, among others. As we see in this brief overview that psychology as a discipline has seen dramatic growth and change since its beginning as a branch of philosophy. However, the story does not end here. Psychology has continued to evolve since 1960 and new ideas and perspectives have been introduced. Recent research in psychology looks at many aspects of human experiences, from the biological influences on behavior to the impact of social and cultural facts. Today, most psychologists do not identify themselves with a single school of thought. They draw on ideas from different theoretical backgrounds, which has contributed to the development of new ideas and theories which will continue to evolve the field for years to come. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hit that like button if you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell icon to receive notifications. Thank you.